CI/CD for Salesforce. The intro nobody gives you before this, and the reason the last 2 sessions on Scratch orgs and source tracking actually mattered. Here's the big idea. CI/CD is not a separate DevOps skill you bolt onto Salesforce. It's the automation that sits directly on top of source-driven development. If you followed Scratch orgs in Git, you already have almost everything this needs. Let's break down the acronym properly. CI is continuous integration. Every push change gets automatically merged, validated, and tested against the rest of the code base, instead of sitting isolated until one big, risky integration day. CD is continuous delivery or continuous deployment. Once a change passes CI, it's automatically prepared for release, and in the deployment version, actually released, without a person manually clicking through setup. Put together, commit a change, and a pipeline picks it up, checks it, tests it, and moves it toward production. Same sequence, every time, whether it's Friday afternoon or 3 in the morning. Here's the part people skip past. CI/CD depends entirely on source-driven development. A pipeline checks out your metadata from Git and deploys it. If your org's configuration only exists by clicking through setup, there's nothing for a pipeline to check out. This is exactly why Scratch orgs and source tracking came before this session. They're not a separate topic. They're the prerequisite. Once metadata lives in Git as the single source of truth, a pipeline can build and validate it the same way a Scratch org builds from a definition file. Now, why manual deployment stops working as you scale? It's not one big failure. It's small cracks that show up quietly. First crack, change sets missed dependencies. A flow references a field nobody remembered to include, and the deployment fails in production instead of before it. Second crack, testing becomes optional under deadline pressure. Nobody runs the full Apex test suite by hand every time. Eventually, someone skips it just this once. Third crack, deployment becomes an event, not a routine. When it's rare and manual, every deployment carries more weight than it should, so teams deploy less often, which makes each deployment bigger and riskier. The opposite of what you want. The goal of CI/CD isn't speed for its own sake. It's making deployment boring, small, low risk, automatic, and frequent, instead of rare, manual, and high stakes. Now the tools. Conceptual overview only. You don't need to master any of these yet. GitHub Actions. CI/CD built directly into GitHub. You write a YAML workflow that runs on every push, using the Salesforce CLI to validate and deploy. CircleCI, a dedicated CI/CD platform that works with any Git host. Similar YAML-based setup to GitHub Actions, popular with teams that want their CI tool decoupled from where the code lives. Copado, a release management platform built specifically for Salesforce. Instead of handwriting pipeline scripts, you configure environments, promotion paths, and approval gates through a UI built around Salesforce's release process. Gearset, another Salesforce native CI/CD tool, known for comparing org metadata and catching configuration drift. Often the first paid tool a team adopts once a bare-bones script stops being enough. None of these is the right answer on its own. GitHub Actions and CircleCI are closer to the metal and need you to build the pipeline logic yourself. Copado and Gearset trade some of that flexibility for structure built specifically around Salesforce releases. Strip away the tool-specific syntax, and almost every Salesforce CI/CD pipeline follows the same 4 stages, in order. Lint checks the code and metadata for obvious problems before spending time on a full deployment. Validate performs a check-only deployment to confirm the metadata is deployable without committing it. Deploy actually moves it into a sandbox, staging org, or production. Test runs the Apex suite against what just deployed and fails loudly if it doesn't hold up. Each stage only runs if the one before it passed. Everything after this session, branching strategy, environment promotion, approval gates, builds on top of these 4 stages. You don't need to set up a pipeline today. You need to recognize what one is doing when you see it. Full written breakdown is on realsyllabus.com.